love it. I love it. I love it. Look at this. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
And welcome to an even more special edition of Dana White's Contender Series breakdown with USC Addicts. My name is Aaron, and I am here without a co-host. I am here solo. It is me and only me. So if you're still with me here, I appreciate you. We are going to be breaking down the Contender Series here. This is Season 3, Episode 8, I believe. I have no one to ask what it is, so we're going to go with that. And this has been my thing, so did a Contender Series. I've loved it since the beginning here. At times, yes, it feels like blind picking a little bit, but hey, we're still here. Layden has not been able to make it through the season here. I'll allow him to talk about that at the time he wants to, if he wants to, but hey, you know, the Contender Series, not for the faint of heart. If you're still here, you're probably here to get a little bit of a breakdown. I worked really hard on some research here from what I could do, which any of us who do Dana White Contender Series research, we know sometimes it's a little hard, but had double the research and double the fun here. So we're going to jump in with the first fight here, and it is going to be at light heavyweight, and it is between Carl No Worries Reed and Julius Angelica. I will do my best with pronunciation as well, but I will be starting with Carl No Worries Reed, the 6'3", 205er, 30 years old, fighting out of Upstate Karate, which is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson's gym, as well as Chris Weidman, his brother-in-law. Carl Reed is 6-1 overall, with 3 TKOs in his 6 wins. His only loss coming in the first season of Dana White's Contender Series by decision to a guy who was just able to kind of wear him out with a lot of pressure and wrestling. Carl Reed was only 2-0 at the time. At times, I think Carl Reed has shown a little bit of a weird overreaction to, not weird, but overreaction to strikes. So I'd like to see him work on his reaction to that a little better, his ability to take a punch perhaps. But I think working with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, a lot of movement and kicks have been worked on. I've been able to see a few videos of his training as well and watch a few of his fights. Carl Reed seems to be a pretty decent all-around guy. He does have 3 stoppages, all coming by way of strikes within 3 minutes, or he goes to decision. He's a blitzer. His opponent's not too notable. Again, training out of Upstate Karate, working with Weidman and Wonderboy for this camp, I think will really be helpful. Carl has good wrestling, good pressure, and like I said, the ability to blitz his opponents. I think he has a really tough matchup here with a guy in Julius who's fought at LFA and is a good guy. Also has the ability to out-pressure himself. And going on to Julius Angelica, he's the 28-year-old here, 205er, 6'3", out of St. Charles MMA, decent camp in Missouri, I believe. 6-1 overall, 3 TKOs and 3 submissions. Like Reed, Angelica also lost to Cameron Olson, although his did not come on the Contender Series. And Olson also was able to put him away by triangle in that fight. So Reed lost by decision, Julius lost by triangle, both pretty early on in their careers, though. So maybe not the most relevant thing. Julius is a very well-rounded fighter, definitely a good aggression level. Although the level of his opponents he's faced may be less than that of Reed, which is hard to do. Both just haven't fought too great of opponents. I also believe Reed will have the reach advantage here. It was hard to find those official numbers, but by the looks of both on tape, looks like Reed is maybe the longer, more movement-based guy. I just think that the camp and overall athleticism of Reed will be the difference here. Julius, to me, has looked slow at times, although strong. He's looked pretty slow, and against a smaller guy in one of his fights, got cracked pretty well a few times and just looked a little bit rudimentary at times. So I'm going to take Reed to get actually a second-round TKO, although I could come in the first. I think distance is going to be a big dictator in this fight, but so that may be harder with the smaller octagon, but I'm still going to take Reed to be able to get his respect with his power, and I'll take Reed to get a second round TKO. I'd anticipate him being a slight dog too. I don't think it will be a huge dog, but I think Julius fighting in slightly better organizations and being a little bit more noted coming into this fight, maybe a slight favorite, but I'm comfortable taking the underdog and Reed. So I hope it's a good fight. I'm looking forward to it at 205. And we will move on to the next fight here coming at bantamweight. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I think it's another good fight. And this is between Tony Gravely and Ray the Judge Rodriguez. I will start out breaking down Tony Gravely. He's the 5'6", 135er, 27 years old, 18-5 overall. So 23 fights coming into the Contender Series. I really like seeing that. 7 TKOs and 3 submissions in his 18 wins. So he has a good amount of decision wins as well, which I have no problem seeing that also. He's on a 6-fight win streak, all of which coming by finish. So Tony faced some really good competition prior to getting this opportunity on the Contender Series, and he did lose a lot of those fights. He lost to guys like Manny Bermudez by armbar, lost to Ricky Bandejas, who went on to beat James Gallagher in Bellator, lost to Mirav Dvalishvili. So I think clearly, judging from this finishing streak in the last 6, he's gained some valuable lessons from losses. I really am okay with guys losing early on in their careers. Obviously, you love seeing those undefeated records, but if you're willing to go through those losses and really learn the lessons, you can really come a long way. And him having 23 fights prior to getting this shot, I think shows he's really well seasoned and fairly ready for this fight. Tony's a fairly good wrestler also, and he does have a slam KO as well. So when watching this guy, he reminded me a lot of Miles Simon, who for me has been the best prospect to come off of this season, even though Miles, I believe, got a decision in his fight. I really like how Miles looked, and I like how Tony's looking. So he's pretty well-rounded. He's got good cardio to go with his skills, been facing solid competition. And at least at times, Tony fights as a southpaw, so that's just one more obstacle that his opponent, Ray Rodriguez, is going to have to overcome here. And that brings me to Ray the Judge Rodriguez, the 5'7", 31-year-old 135er fighting out of Opana Jiu-Jitsu, is 15-5. He's faced some pretty good competition and not just lost all of them, but beat some decent guys. The most notable of which being Jimmy Flick, who by KO in round 2. Pretty good wrestler on the regional scene, Jimmy Flick, and at some point I could see him making a UFC run, actually. And Ray's last loss was by submission to Chris Gutierrez, who I really respect Chris Gutierrez. We saw how good he was in his last fight here on the Shevchenko Carmouche card. Ray throws pretty wild on the feet at times, and I think he needs to be a little more controlled as the taller, longer guy here. And use a little bit of a jab as opposed to just looping hooks. If he, isn't careful, I think he leaves himself open to getting taken down. And if he does get taken down, I think he has shown to be pretty slick from his back. What I hope he isn't doing, though, is giving up the takedown a little bit more easily, because he has had success on his back against some of his other opponents, because this is a higher level of competition he's facing here, and that doesn't quite work as well as we've seen. So I think Tony's going to be just physically overwhelming. I'll take Gravely to get a round 2 TKO. I'd anticipate Tony being a decent favorite as well. I can understand people taking a shot at anybody on this card, I'll say that. But I think Ray Rodriguez will be a fairly decent dog, so take a shot if you're inclined, but I think Tony Gravely controls this one. I just think the question is, can he get the decision or not? And I anticipate he will be getting the decision. And this leads us on to our next fight. This is a female fight, and it is, I believe, going to be fought at 135. And it is between Shayna the Shanimal, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Young, and against Sarah Too Sweet Alper, and this will be at bantamweight. Shanna, I'll just say Shanna from here on out. Shanna has fought some of her fights at 125, so just one thing to note here. Shanna the Shanimal Young is 5'7", 125, or fought her last fight at 125, 5'7", 135 for this fight. 27 years old. She is 6-1. She was a college wrestler, so that's definitely her base. Strong in the clinch. She has some okay stand-up against fighters with 2 fights or less, as all of her fights have come against fighters with very little experience. She has had trouble finding opponents, but that won't be an issue if she can win this one. So I think she, for the most part, looks to maintain pressure against the cage, land strikes against the cage at times. She's a really solid wrestler and looks pretty physical in there, and I think will benefit from not cutting to 125 and having that extra 10 pounds not to cut for the weight cut. So basically a solid wrestler, developing in other areas, but wrestling is her base. And that brings us to another wrestler named Sarah Too Sweet Alper, the 28-year-old, 5'4", so she's a little bit of a smaller, squatter wrestler as opposed to the longer, rangier Shanna here. Sarah Too Sweet Alper fights out of American Elite MMA. She's 8-4. Like I said, pretty much a straight wrestler. Reminds me of a lot of Callie Robbins, who we saw fight a few weeks ago against Hannah Goldie. So not exactly a compliment, but it is what it is. Sarah has very rudimentary striking. She seems to be less explosive, more of a reach out and clinch type of wrestler. I think Shanna will get the user stand up a little bit here and piece up Sarah a little bit before possibly wrestling her herself. I'll take Shanna to get a round 2 submission win, or actually I'll take a round 2 ground and pound win for Shanna after just being able to wear her out with superior pace and conditioning. So I'll take Shanna by round 2 TKO. I'd anticipate her being one of the bigger favorites on the card. And this brings us to our next fight, which is, I think, going to be the fight of the night here. It's a really exciting fight, and it's between Brock Shatatuska Weaver, who was supposed to fight on, I believe, week 2 or 3 against Leon Shabazian. And he's fighting against a guy from my hometown in East Lansing, Michigan, and Devin the Prodigy Smith. So I'm definitely excited for this fight in a lot of different ways. I think, first of all, it's a very exciting fight. I'll start by breaking down Brock Weaver. The 27-year-old is 12-4, 2 TKOs and 5 submissions. Brock is an absolute wild man in there. If you want to watch a crazy fight, watch his fight with Charles Crazy Horse, or I believe Charles Felony Bennett, now is his nickname, and where both guys just went to war. He's not the most technical guy in there, but he's an absolute scrapper through and through. Goes where the fight goes. Fought Joe Riggs and bare knuckle to a decision. Takes some shots to get some shots for sure. Brock may have trouble getting inside on Devin, but he's not too shy. Devin is very untested and young in his career here, but Devin has very good power, and that brings me into Devin the Prodigy Smith out of East Lansing, Michigan, as I said. Murcielago MMA is his camp. Good camp. I've been there, personally visited before. Very nice camp, good fighters in there, such as Deshaun Townsend and others. And he is 5'11", 170, 9-1 overall, 2 TKOs and 4 submissions. He lost his pro debut and has lost 9 straight since then. Won 9 straight since then. Devin is a pretty solid looking welterweight, has some good power in his hands, has very good finishing ability on the ground. However, he's been pretty untested to this point in his career, and even this fight against Brock Weaver is several steps up from any fight he's ever had. So I do think that Devin has a habit of sometimes backing up the fence and allowing his opponent to come to him and getting away with it. And he'd be smart to implement more volume, more movement here. But it may be a gas tank issue for Devin. I do think Weaver looks to be the better conditioned athlete of the two. I do think Devin may possibly be more well-rounded. And Devin, I think, really has to use his wrestling here. And I'm just not sure Devin's ready for this level of competition in Brock Weaver. It's quite a step up, and Brock has been very ready to get in there and get his opportunity on the Contender Series. So I do think Brock gets inside on Devin and ends up getting a round 2 knockout. So I'll take another round 2 TKO here for Brock Weaver. I would anticipate Brock Weaver being the favorite. And I'm rooting for Devin as he's a local guy. I haven't gotten to see him. He was there after I left Michigan, but still it's always good to see guys ice Lansing. So definitely an interesting fight at 170, but Brock Weaver's been preparing for this Contender Series opportunity all summer, and I think he ends up coming through with a TKO in round 2. And that brings us to what, according to Tapology right now, is the main event. Sometimes they move it around, but this is the main event as I have it. So it is between Herdem Alsabek, and he is facing off against William the Nightmare Knight. Knight is spelled the same way as his last name with a K, so very punny nickname there. And this is fought at 205, and I will start out with Hermden Alsabek, the 5-0 205er out of Black House MMA. He has 3 TKOs and 2 submissions in his 5 wins. He's a solid-looking Hermden is a solid-looking 205er, good movement and volume on the feet, has decent to good wrestling, both offensively and defensively. Good ground and pound and top control once he establishes it and gets on top. Throws a mix of punches and kicks. He's pretty active striking in the clinch as well. He hasn't been too tested, but he's facing a fellow guy in 4-0 and his opponent in Knight, who also hasn't been too tested himself. So reminds me of the fight a few weeks ago between the 5-0 and 4-0 205ers. Both guys have some good horsepower, I think, and I think that there will be a lot of stand-up here, but I see Hermden mixing in some clinch work as well to sap out some of the muscles of the bigger guy in William Knight, who has spent some time at heavyweight. And that brings me to William the Nightmare Knight. He was 31 years old, 205. Wasn't able to find an official height, but he looks to be in the 5'10 range. Definitely looks like a wider, stronger type of 205er. He's 4-0 with 4 TKOs and 8-1 as an amateur. Had a win over Jorgen De Castro in there. William is definitely a hard hitter at 205. Spent time, as I said, at heavyweight during his amateur career before coming down. Strong guy, has been effective against so-so competition so far, but you beat who's in front of you. He really looks very wide, really strong, and the gas tank looks like it requires a lot of gas, so that's where I question him. I do think he'll be the stronger guy, but I think he's going to be slower and have a lower gas tank. I think Hermden ends up taking this into the later rounds and running away with the decision, possibly a submission win, but I think that Hermden is going to be able to gas William and get a decision here. I do think one of the advantages is that this is in the smaller octagon, so these guys who have the smaller gas tank but the higher power, sometimes it really plays into their advantage here. Hermden also has been off for about a year, and both guys aren't too tested, so either guy wins. It's not the biggest shock to me, but overall, I really appreciate and enjoy this set of fights here. Well, I believe we have 2 or 3 more weeks of the Contender Series left, so hopefully I'll get a little better at this, not having anybody to bounce off of. I know that not having Layden here doesn't feel the same to me, but at the same point, I'm still really glad that I was able to talk about these fights with you all. Enjoy them. If you're listening to this, you are an absolute fucking OG. I appreciate you. And just enjoy the Contender Series, everybody. The odds still weren't out. The odds get released about 12 hours before the fight. So still weren't out at this point, so I did my best to give you a little prognostication on what I thought the odds would be. I do feel that I'll say we get 3 contracts this week. So I won't say who they are, but I'll say 3 of 5 fights end up resulting in a contract this week. So I think that's a pretty good sign that it was a decent to fairly decent Contender Series. Again, thank you for listening. Enjoy the fights, everybody, and I will see you back with Layden for the next breakdown of the Zhang Andrade fight on the 31st. Actually, I'll see you for a Contender Series before then, since we don't have a fight card next Saturday for the first time in however long. So with that convoluted conclusion and everything, I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for listening to this breakdown. This is Aaron, and I am out. Enjoy the fights, everybody. Peace.